Last week, we started talking about relationships. Mother, daughter, grandmother, granddaughter, right? Over your head, well, I know. And I was looking at that and I was thinking, okay, we can play with this a little deeper and try to create some connection, because I saw some, Delta go-around kind of stuff going on. What we just did out on the training floor was relationships as well.
What was it called that we just
Qigong.
did? That's it?
Well, we were playing with the principle of rising energy,
Thank you.
and that's the principle we're playing with all month here. And so rising energy has to do with your relationship to the ground. So grounding energy is first, always. Then from there, going into rising energy. And so what I was inviting you to do is play with relationships. And so if we look at upper, middle, and lower dantian. So this is the dantians as opposed to the mental, emotional, physical. Same thing. Still have the same concept. Focus on the lower dantian being grounded, and then inviting the middle and the upper to engage from there. Right? So in an exaggerated sense, I am rooting and then building up the spine. Hi, Martha. Right, so I'm rooting and then building up the spine all the way through the dantians. That's what we're looking to do. So, being able to recognize that I don't want to be completely grounded all the time, heavy, stuck, rooted, like not moving. Just like I don't want to always be completely up all the time, stiff and rigid, and right. I need to have mobility. I need to have that flexibility, that place to create fluid movement. So this is a relationship, and in this case, when we're looking at the lower dantian, we want half of the attention of the lower dantian to be going into the ground and the other half to be going up the spine. That's what we were playing with out there. That concept of roots, stems, flowers is being able to, if I'm doing Tiger Pushes Mountain, for example, I want to root first, build the stem up in order to move the hands, for example. And then I want to root into the ground, build the stem up to express the hands, to express the flowers. I don't want to sit here and do this, and I don't want to do this, right? I want to, it's like a wave coming from the ground, coming up the body, and out into the hands. So it's a relationship. You're building a relationship, a connection, 1 to 2 to 3.
Can somebody come out here too?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's not a stopper. This, if you think about it from heaven, man, earth, the 3 treasures, when we're in alignment, we have access to inspiration in spirit. Okay? I've seen clients who were very much up in their head. Once they started rooting and working through different issues and such, start to become more creative, more expressive in different ways. They started becoming inspired in their own ways. And that's what we're looking for. It's not that being in your head is bad, or being only in your body is bad, or being only an emotional creature is bad. It's that it's unbalanced. And when we're in that unbalanced state, it creates stagnation, and that stagnation will eventually harm. We want to be able to move If I've got a big project, I want to be more in my head. I want to be more thinking that way, moving in that direction, right? If I have a physical challenge in front of me, maybe helping somebody move or something like that, I'm going to be not thinking as much and focus more on my physical strength and structure and that kind of thing. If I'm having a deeply personal discussion with my wife, I want to be very open-hearted. Yes? Does that make sense? So it's not that it's all good or all bad or one or the other. It's being able to move freely and effectively between all of them. There are times when anxiety might be exactly what we need. In the right amount. There's a curve, a stress curve, Yerkes-Dodson curve, that, and I won't depict it properly, but I'll try. So in essence, down here, if you look at just the stress response in the human, down here, no stress. Well, this can be considered stagnation. Flatlining, if you will. Not literally, but figuratively. Then there's the stress that is motivating. Okay? So I got some things I want to do today. I'm gonna get that motion going. So that can be considered a little bit of stress response. It is not a little. It is a stress response. I've got like 3 things I want to get done today, so I need to really get on the ball. Right? This morning I had to get up, take care of the pig and the cats, and feed myself, and then get to the first
Exit.
No, I had 2 classes this morning, and then I had to come over here for this one. So there's a bit of a stress response going on that is inviting me to keep moving, right? But if I get stuck in traffic on the way, which I did, that can start to push me into an elevated condition. And these are not the words Yerkes-Dodson uses, but this is what I'm using today. So my stress becomes elevated. That's starting to get into that zone where my body's starting to tense up, where I'm starting to, my circulation is going to change, that kind of thing. So when we get into high levels of stress, the circulation starts to constrict.
Chris,
Yeah.
can I respond to that for a minute?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here right now stressing over something as simple as I don't have a Kleenex. And what happens if I need to blow my nose and I don't have a Kleenex?
There's a whole box of tissues on one of you ladies, would you mind going to get the box?
And that's an example though.
Oh, that's
for
an
me,
example, right.
that I'm stressing over something as simple as needing a Kleenex.
So with that, the thing is,
One of my other issues is asking for help. Thank you.
Guys, meet Martha, by the way, if you hadn't met Martha.
I just met Mark.
Okay, that's Richard, Martha.
Hi, Richard.
So,
Nice to meet you.
that may seem minuscule, right? It's just a Kleenex, right? But if it's happening down here, it's no big deal.
Yeah,
But if it's happening after a long drive, after maybe
Being
having
late.
trouble with your respiratory machine, or just life in general in some
Yeah.
cases, and it's happening right here, it could be what throws you over the edge into the unhealthy stress.
I mean, I'm trembling
I know.
over what this day.
So ground yourself and breathe. You know how to do
I am
this.
working on that.
All
I missed
right.
the breathing exercise y'all did.
So the point here is when we're getting into, you've got stress that can be motivating, and then you've got this elevated process where things are starting to get a little bit loose. This is not ungrounded yet, but the soil is starting to get a little sandy, a little bit shaky. Make sense?
Is it at the peak point that it's overwhelming then?
So when you get into this area, it starts to become, I'll use the word unbalanced. And again, I'm talking about the Yerkes-Dodson curve, but I'm not using their language because I don't have it memorized. But in that, we want stress to a certain point, but once it gets to a certain point, the reason I say unbalanced here is for exactly the reason Martha shared. It doesn't take anything at all to send me down that slope, to send me into overwhelm. So coming down into this area, you're getting into overwhelm. Make sense? And so, yes, sir.
Just want to share, working in Romania for a period of time, most of the unit I was in were just the impact of isolation, deprivation, and no stimulation. And one of the dynamics is they would stimulate themselves. You would see kids rocking, shaking, auto-stimulation. And when they needed to get to sleep, you would see a whole ward of this, then all of a sudden, their heads. So they learned to calm themselves by waking themselves up, to let them know that they were connected to themselves, and went to sleep. The other thing, just how sensitive this curve is, when we would start with just making basic contact after physically working in steps to get close enough to be safe. We would stop the rocking at a point and put them gently down. Because if we rocked too much, it became frightening.
Or if you stop too quickly.
Yes, exactly. So what we said as a group, we had to gradually, let's warm it down, gradually go, do some gentle smile, gentle tone, and gently place, so that there could be a safe connection to what was coming in from the outside.
As we were discussing, and I was looking at that curve, I thought of the time that I got bullied into getting on a roller coaster. I like roller coasters, and I kinda got bullied into it because I had kids. And kids would bully you into stuff. And they got me on a roller coaster, and I would do okay on the climb up. But when we got to the very top, the only way I could survive it was hold my breath, close my eyes until I got back down where I was safe. So that's a big key for me, because I can't afford to be holding my breath with COPD.
Well, I wanna touch, because we're still working kidneys, we're still working from that angle, and I wanna get into that with this. But are there any questions on this particular concept? Because this will kind of feed into what we're talking about. These are relationships, so like in this case, this is a relationship with stress. You know, people tend to think good, bad, kind of black and white thinking, and it's not. That's why you hear me say all the time, it depends. Stress by itself is not bad. Anger by itself is not bad. You know, these emotions or mental states that we feel overwhelmed by are not bad by themselves. It's how they're applied within our lives, how we perceive them. So looking at anxiety, for example, as always bad is not fair to the purpose for anxiety in our beings. There are times when we have to have that boost to get through something. Think about what happens if, you know, you wake up in the middle of the night, smoke alarms are going off, and you've got to gather the kids and get out of the house. You don't want to be going, oh God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, come on, I mean, for Christ's sake. You don't want to be sleepy and groggy, so as soon as you get that alarm, boom, your stress hits. That there's actually here, you know, there's this in this area you can perform. But when you start to get unbalanced, it's kind of, you may perform a little better, you may actually just fall right off the wheel.
Get into fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
And you
Well, I mean,
freeze in the
this
fire,
is,
that's bad.
this is kicking the sympathetic nervous system on. Right? And so recognizing that The stress response by itself, anxiety by itself, fear by itself is not good or bad. It just is. What we do with it, how we respond to it, how we work with it, makes the difference between whether it's helpful or harmful to our being. Questions on that? Okay. And we may get into that like completely deeply at one point or another, I don't know. But when we look at, we've been talking about kidneys and fear. And let's talk about relationships with fear.
Just in time for my least favorite word.
No, it's not. Grief is your least favorite word.
Depends on what day it is.
Fear by itself is neither good nor bad, like I just said. So let's look at the relationships. Give me one instance where fear can be bad, in the sense of, on the spectrum of fear, there's no place for it in this particular scenario, but it's here and I'm having to deal with it.
Getting up in front of a class when I'm in college and speaking.
Okay, so public speaking. Okay, so in that situation, the fear, so if I'm expected to be doing some public speaking, that means that I have something that I am being asked to share with an audience. Okay? Fear causing me to not want to do that is creating a stagnation, and it's preventing me from showing up. Right? So that's why it would come into the category of a negative experience with fear. What about a positive experience with fear?
Not going into a place in the world that's dangerous.
So seeing a dangerous situation and saying, yeah, I'm going to steer clear.
Or
So-
even another good one is being afraid to touch a rattlesnake. It's gonna bite you.
So avoiding danger, I'll say. Okay?
Another is coming across a fear, like when I talk kayaking, several had bad experiences with water, and we went step by step, and eventually moved to the PFD, being holding and eventually falling out of a kayak to support. Positive experiences reaching that edge that at one time.
Well, we'll get there.
Okay.
Don't steal my thunder.
Yeah, he
Oh.
mentioned kayaking, and I'm just thinking of my son who's drowning in a kayak.
So, another negative experience with fear.
Open space, fear of space, fear of being closed in. Fear of mentally, fear of being, can't be perfect, fear of not being enough. Anything is, those are just things that I'm aware of.
Understood. You just threw a whole bunch out there. I don't know
Are we on the
shorthand.
positive side or negative side right now?
Negative side. So public speaking in this case, it held me back. So phobias, I think we touch differently.
Okay.
I'm looking for things that either motivate us or create
Fear-
stagnation.
Fear of
So in
abandonment.
this case, this motivated to protect myself. This caused me to stagnate. The fear motivated me to not do that.
I got you now.
I
Okay.
have the fear,
Go ahead,
the
Jeannie.
fear of not being in control.
Loss of control, that's a good
Loss
one.
of control, yeah. So it's fixing to say in reference to my son, I had no control over keeping him from doing the kayak and drowning himself.
Did he die? I don't
first time I seen him do it.
It's
I
like,
said,
this is something I don't remember at all.
Yeah, well, it wasn't important in what we were dealing with.
Okay, so we're going back and forth intentionally. Well, what about a positive fear? A positive experience with fear.
Knowing your limits.
Boundaries? Okay, I'll say healthy boundaries.
Help, yeah.
Something I heard about, there was a whole, movie on, mountain climbers, and they did, DNA tests, and they are actually missing, their physical structures in their brain are different. They're, not able to be afraid like the rest of us. So they're a subset of the population that their boundaries are, and limits are not anything like the rest of us.
Fearless.
Yeah, they have fearless genetically.
I just thought they were batshit crazy for this. I'll go with that. Another negative experience with fear. Dave, anything?
Negative experience with fear.
So these two are really good.
I think the fear of going into action without sufficient information, which sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's not good. Sometimes you have to go into action even though you don't have enough information to go on, you're just going on intuition, you're just flying blind.
Okay,
What's the fear of,
hang on, let me stay with this. Write it down if you need to. I want it, just give me a second. So what that sounds like to me is if I'm afraid I don't have enough information to make the next step, for example. Could that be a fear of making mistakes?
The word I'm thinking
Is
is
that-
loss.
does
Fear
it-
of being wrong.
Fear of being wrong?
Yeah.
Mine, I'm thinking fear of abandonment with that. Because sometimes if I lose control, if I'm afraid, of doing something wrong, I'm afraid I'll cost me a relationship.
Yeah, there's a myriad of underlying potential there. And so I'm trying to stay kind of at
Focus,
a surface,
yeah.
because we start to get into the 3 insults to the soul, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, that's a whole class by itself.
But there's definitely a fear of being wrong.
Yeah. So being wrong has a lot of meanings behind it, right? But let's go to a positive fear. So we've got avoiding danger, healthy boundaries. What's another positive use for fear?
I don't know how to put it for your blackboard there, but once I, realized that fear is positive, it can be positive, then it makes me stop and think about what I do before I do the next right thing, or do the next thing. So it's almost like fear makes you stop and get your brain back into action, so it can increase your intelligence.
yeah, I was gonna say, would it be motivation? Because it
Yeah,
motivates you to
motivation.
take action.
Yeah, fear
Yes,
motivates.
yes, that's a good way to put it. Cheryl, did you have yours?
Yeah, I was thinking of, fear of repeating something that had caused you an issue before, like an accident or pain. I don't know how to put it into
Phobias.
a small,
Yeah, that could either go into phobias, if the phobia was a past experience. Some phobias don't have a connection to a past experience, they just
They're
are.
just DNA.
Right,
DNA.
genetic
I wasn't thinking of
but,
I was thinking of an
Historic?
incident,
right.
like an
well,
auto accident,
Like you have a car accident and then you're afraid to drive,
right?
right? So, an auto accident to me would be an example of losing control. You didn't have any control over it, you're stopped at the traffic light and somebody plows into you from
Okay.
behind. So there's a loss of control there. So I would say that that fear falls into that category,
What about,
because it creates that loss of control, and now I'm gonna get behind the wheel and I'm afraid I'm gonna lose control again. You know, I had a friend who, this was many, many years ago, but she was in a torrential downpour and hydroplaned and plowed into the red guardrail and everything. For a long time, she's been really, really afraid. She still drives, but it's been very scary for her.
So are we talking about fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if it's not at your hand, cause loss of
Yeah,
control,
yeah, yeah.
I think of it at
Cheryl?
your hand.
Does something triggers the past things, or?
Yeah, I think
We'll get into
loss
triggers.
of the, fear of the unknown.
So fear of the unknown, I think, is the way to approach that. Thank you, Martha. So,
Fear of taking a test.
That's fear of the unknown.
Mhm.
so
Might
what
have
about
lost
another
it.
positive fear? We've got, avoidance, protecting yourself, so self-preservation really is more along this line. I wanna put that instead. Okay, so we've got a self-preservation, we're establishing healthy boundaries, and it can be motivating. It can get us moving in a direction that we wanna go. Okay, one more over here, and then we'll play with it.
How about fear of, I don't know how to say it, I was gonna say,
He switched on the.
fear that you're going to say something that will hurt somebody else or cause somebody else to be hurt.
Yeah.
You know, like, you wanna say something.
Wouldn't that be this?
Yeah.
No, I was saying in healthy,
In a supportive
because
way?
it keeps you from, that type of fear keeps you from lashing out. Okay.
That's a boundary issue.
Yeah.
If I see something that is personal to you, and I know if I say something about it, it's gonna hurt your feelings, and I hold my tongue, that's a boundary issue.
Okay.
And if I say it, I'm imposing on your boundaries because I've hurt you. Right?
I'm struggling to find the right word, but fear sometimes can drive me, going motivation, but it can drive me to set goals and be more creative and do the steps, do black and white steps to get to my purpose in life, or my purpose in that day even, so.
How about, okay, so that feeds into motivation, but I think you touched on another point. Focus,
Yes,
There
that's
you
the
go.
word.
That's a good one.
okay?
Fear can help me find focus.
Right, so, we did this just to kind of see the fact that it's not all bad or all good, it depends. Right? So in a public speaking situation, if you think about it, I have a fear of public speaking, but I have this event that I have to go speak at. So if I'm able to step past that fear, initially that fear can help me focus.
When I pulled up to the
It can-
driveway,
Hang on.
sorry,
It can create that, because if you think about some of the stuff we've talked about before, when we get into that sympathetic response, we start to become a little tunnel visioned. Right, when we're on that Yerkes-Dodson curve and we're up in the performance area, we're actually, kind of getting a little tunnel visioned. You think about in sports athletes, when they get into the zone, everything else is tuned out. That is a form of tunnel vision, but it is helpful, not harmful. Right? So in that case of like public speaking, over here it's a fear, it can keep me completely stuck. Or if I'm able to move through it, if I find the motivation, if I say, I can do this, then I can get to that point where once I get up on the stage and I start talking, then I start to focus and off I go. Does that make sense? You were saying.
I was just saying that when I grew up and finally got taught, I was right at that moment, there was a song on my radio that was just bringing joy, and I'm going, God dang it, I have to make a decision between getting out of my car or staying in it. lost in this song. And it took about 30 seconds for me to make a decision, you know, and then I had to gather up all my stuff. You know, it's like there was two conflicting desires of the heart at that point, and it's like I had to make a choice between one or the other, and I needed to be in here more than I needed to listen to the song. But there was also a fear that she was gonna say something that made me feel something.
Loss of control. Okay,
And that's one of my major ones.
what would it take to come across and take that fear of loss of control and do something good with it? What do you think?
Big focus.
Well, this, to me, loss of control is like I feel uprooted, I feel maybe overwhelmed. I don't have the ability to make a decision about this because it's not mine to decide on. Something is taking charge for me. So what can I do in that? So if I take that fear, and I'm spitballing here, if I take that fear and I apply it to self-preservation,
Self-preservation, I need to be in
so
different.
if I'm in a situation where I don't have control, what can I do within myself to protect myself from this? Right, so like if I'm being forced into a boat and I don't know how to swim, so maybe I'm being, really random comment or statement here, but a group of people is taking me hostage and they're forcing me in a boat and I don't know how to swim. Okay, so this is a loss of control. I don't know how to swim, but I'm being made to go out on the water. Life preserver, you know, if I have a life preserver, if I can get a life preserver, I can create a space where even in this fearful situation, I can do something for myself to try and help, so that self-preservation concept can take that fear and push it to what can I do to protect myself. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it
I mean,
does.
I'm really spitballing here.
Yeah. For me, if I can find something concrete to hang on to, you know,
An anchor point.
an anchor point. Yeah.
Right, and so self-preservation could be that anchor point that says, well, yeah, I'm in a situation that's a real mess, but what can I do to protect myself?
Is that, I'm trying to get the theme here for me. You started out saying, in itself, it's neither good or bad. And is the implication that all these fears, if one found a new way to respond, to work with, connect, whatever words we use, focus, we're learning to work with, engage in a new way?
Can you stop getting ahead of me, or do you want the marker?
No. No, I'm just trying to learn.
I know.
He'll be safe for you, he's a smart ass at times.
No.
He knows that. It's a continuum.
Now, I'm getting what you're saying.
This fear is the same fear.
That makes sense.
It's the same fear. My body is going to respond the same way on both sides of this. So it's really not a good fear or a bad fear. It's just
A fear.
fear.
So it's your perception of it.
It's my perception of it, and it's what I do with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, how you handle it.
We
Right.
use,
So I had, we were gonna kind of wing through more examples, but there you have it.
we talk about anchor points.
Yeah, class is over.
Class dismissed.
Fear the unknown would
Okay, so fear of the unknown.
Yes, you
When we look at fear of the unknown, we don't have boundaries. There's no boundaries for us to, you think about with young children, they're pretty much fearless. But they're open into that space of exploration and everything, and then the first time they run into something, they're like, ooh, there's a boundary. that hurt. And so we start to depend on boundaries. Well, tell me how to feel. Tell me what you think. Tell me how to think. You know, all you have to do is turn on television and everybody's telling you how to think. Hell, I'm standing up here and it can be perceived that I'm telling you how to think. I'm not. I'm hoping that that's coming across, but that's an idea. Tell me how to think. From school, all the way through school, we're taught what to think and how to think and what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad, kind of in a black and white way. So when we get into a fear of the unknown, personally I feel at this moment in time, unless the conversation shifts my opinion, is boundaries. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's next. I don't know. And so I create that, where are my boundaries here?
You made a good point there when we talked about that word anchor. What I was taught an anchor was, it's like this 500-pound thing, so when you say anchor, that's where my brain goes automatically.
Right.
I can't carry 500 pounds.
Jeannie?
Kind of what she was saying on anchor and all this and that, it's, I want to say something about not being in your body, being dissociated. If a child is taught to sit down, be quiet, don't move, then all those things can create a self-identity crisis. It's like, am I here? Because I can't hear myself, I can't feel myself, and so there's a nervousness that then can go the opposite, like you were talking in the kids. And then I just think that for people who have this issue, that could be one of the negative fears on this side. Am I really, really here? So if you go to the positive, what would be the positive? It was like, well, when you meditate, you sit still and you be quiet. And so it's like, how do I know I'm really here? And so you find another way to find out that you're really here, and then you can calm down. So it's not a positive fear, it's just another part of the continuum. How do I know I'm here? This self-identity crisis is a fear. And if you've been in trauma and traumatized, then you might be out of your body.
Yep.
Then the solution is to find out how to get back in your body.
Well, the
Which
solution.
is a magic thing. I don't think there's a
No, it's not
step-by-step
magic.
thing. It's just not a
No.
step-by-step thing. It
Oh,
just
I
happens.
disagree.
I disagree too. There's
Oh,
a step.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely a step. I've worked with
Steps.
many people, including myself first.
Yeah. And sometimes the
In
step is,
getting, the principle-based training that we have, I used therapeutically for many years. Grounding is the first step. The thing is that when you begin the process of grounding, very, very basic grounding, whatever's in your way is gonna show up. The key is working on that until grounding becomes easier and safer, and you start to feel safer and safer in your being. Once there's a little bit of grounding going on, then these emotional upheavals, these mental stressors, the dissociation becomes a little bit safer to explore. And so it's just gently working through and getting a little stronger in your ground, feeling a little bit safer. Something bubbles up, you work on it, that helps add to your ability to stay grounded. Something else bubbles up, you work on it, then you become a little more grounded. And it is a process, and it's how people move through it is very unique, but the stepwise process that I have, I find it incredibly consistent.
I want to build on both of those, because I see an integration here. It is really clear that there are steps from my experience of being here. But there's no mental step. There isn't something you can read or do. I'm so aware of grounding differently because every day I stand up and I check in.
Mm-hmm.
And then through time, I have a whole new view of what grounding means and how it's applied. So it's always a process, and it's always a focus.
Well, we're each unique manifestations of the human experience.
Yeah,
Each of us has traveled through this point from where we started to now completely differently.
Going back to your.
Hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Completely differently. And so our experience is absolutely unique. And so then any wounding or any traumas or anything like that that we have experienced, we've experienced them uniquely. Somebody punching me in the face is no big deal, because it's been done so many times, right? It's not that you guys get to punch me in the face. I don't like it. It's just not a big deal. It doesn't get me mad anymore. It used to send me into a rage, but it's happened so much in my experience that it's like, really? Are we going there? But the idea of that, my experience with trauma is completely unique to me.
right.
So my transgression, and well, let me rephrase that. My integration of that trauma is going to be completely unique to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know what mine is, I just know that I can almost dissociate it completely, so I kind of break, and then all of a sudden, I'm grounded, and I don't know what step happened.
So then that becomes about being very present and aware
To know what step.
to very subtle, nuanced things, right?
I hate to say it, but so far it's been prayer, somebody else has been intervening, and then I'm okay.
Okay. Well, that in and of itself, and we can talk about that offline, but that in and of itself basically
It's a
is,
step.
it's a step. And it gives you, so to me, when we are ungrounded, when we dissociated, we completely ungrounded. Grounding energy, the emotional connection to grounding energy is trust.
Good one. Good.
And so if I'm feeling uprooted, one of the first questions I ask myself is, what am I not trusting in this situation? Now, we're getting on another subject altogether here, but that's what this class is about. Were you gonna say something?
No.
Okay. Jeannie?
I don't even have to know that the other person is praying for me, I'll find out later.
That's fine.
So, yeah.
I want to share something on that. Today's a rough day, so I needed to find something I trusted, or someone I trusted, you know, and to move forward. So, of course, my mind went to Chris, and I go, okay, he's in Richardson, he's not here. But I knew how to pick up I knew how to pick up my cell phone and text him, you know, and what I wanted was to be able to talk to him, for him to just tell me, okay, Martha, shut up and take a breath.
That's a nice
never
prayer.
told you to shut up.
No, but I shut up works for me.
That's a really good prayer.
So he says it in a therapeutic way, and I have to transfer it where it's real simple, you know, and I have to go, shut up and take a breath.
You have to,
And I'm going, okay, let me try to do that.
Yeah,
you have
he's
to
good at
transfer
that.
it into Marine.
Yeah.
Chris, you need to say
Shut
that.
up
You
and
say,
take a breath.
shut up and take a breath.
You
It's
know.
on video. And then anybody who gets anxious can
You
just
just
listen
turn
to
the
this
video
video
on,
again.
yeah.
And then I can go even further if I'm in crisis, and I'm gonna go, I don't know how to breathe, I don't know how to breathe, I forgot how to breathe, I forgot how to breathe, and I'm going, just call Chris, he'll tell you how to breathe, and then I can go back into, but I can't call him, I don't know where my cell phone is.
Yep, you need to do a video.
And so finally, I calmed down, because he has taught me very well how to breathe, you know, and so I calm down and I do one of, you know, whatever, like I do Old Man or something like that, and I go, okay, now I'm focused enough to type to him.
Well, look at the market, amazing, meditation, breathing tapes.
There's
Yeah.
thousands of them.
People are looking for connection, relationship.
Right, well, I mean,
And people are anchoring ways to do it.
this morning in clinic, we were talking about breathing, and we were talking about meditation and such, and how breath work by itself for someone who is hurting.
I just.
I got you. I know the routine. For someone that is hurting, the breath by itself is not enough. She's fine.
I know.
The breath by itself is not enough. It's because, and we are getting tangential, but oh well. On the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. The parasympathetic nervous system is the rest, digest, and heal. We access this one through movement, and we access this one through breath. If you think about it logically, if my sympathetic nervous system is amped up, my body refuses to sit still. So asking somebody that it's in a heightened state of anxiety to sit on a cushion in a quiet room and focus on their breath is just about impossible.
I actually use the word it's cruel.
It can be cruel, yes. So we want the breath because the breath is the side that de-escalates. So the value of the breath is really powerful. But what we want to do, particularly with Qigong, is we want to hook the breath and engage the movement so that we can then de-escalate the movement, because the movement wants to escalate us. I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. Right? We're hitting fear, I gotta go, I can't stay here, right? It was an old song, not that old, but you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And so, closing times, good song.
I know it.
So, tying this tangential back into what we're doing, with fear, we can trigger that sympathetic nervous system in that fight or flight, fight, flight, or freeze, right? But even in the freeze mode, where our body is shaking, it's wanting to go, it's just that we're afraid to go now, but we're locked up. So the physical body is very active in that state. Does that make sense? So freeze doesn't mean sleep or rest. It means
Tension.
I can't. Yes? So it's a very sympathetic response. It's a very physical response. The beauty of Qigong is that its breath moves body. I breathe first, move second. Everything we do, ideally, when we get comfortable with it, we're engaging the breath, and then the breath is inviting the body to move. That's key. Because what that does, it says, parasympathetic nervous system, I want you in charge. And we take active control of a system that's normally, because the autonomic nervous system, you can think about it, you can replace autonomic with automatic. Heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, pupil dilation, salivary response, digestive processes, everything that functions in the vascular circulatory dilation, wow. Everything that happens automatically in the body is connected to that autonomic nervous system. That's what this chart is about, right? So everything here. So all of our hormone balances, everything. We can access that and work with it. Yeah, Jeannie.
I just want to see if you have a comment or another example. So in shamanism, if what we're talking about is needed, the type of movement that the scared person or upset person needs to do is not gentle. It's kind of specific movements to get stuff out, to get it out of their field. So gentle movements for them might not be what a shaman would, prescribe, but what would you prescribe?
It depends. You know, when I was saying about the uniqueness of
Each person.
each person's experience with whatever trauma they've gone through, makes my job unique to that person. I'm looking for the relationship between their mental, emotional, and physical beings. I'm looking for their relationship to the 5 elements that we've played with. And I'm looking to see what's driving the boat. Because just because I've had a trauma doesn't mean that my response to trauma is going to be identical from human to human. Right? So for me, the traumas that I had as a kid pushed me towards anger and towards really strong boundaries, I would say walls. And so for somebody else, they may retreat and become very small or
And that would be.
totally amiable, where they just kind of go with the flow with everything because they don't want to
So that would
cause
be earth.
any more problems.
So that would be earth or water for that one?
For which one?
For the one you just described, amiable.
Water. Think about water. You pour it in a cup. Okay, I'm in a cup.
Yeah.
You take that and pour it into a bottle and it says, okay, I'm in a bottle. You lay the bottle on its side, it says, fine, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's amiable.
Just curious.
I never thought of water as amiable, but that's cool.
Chris doesn't use this title, but I consider Chris a shaman.
Yeah, oh yeah, he is, definitely.
So, when we're looking at it, let's tie this back in. If we use Qigong and you think about that breath, movement, and intention that we talk about with Qigong, I want the breath to drive the movement, and I want the being, my being, to bring an intention into the practice, like what we were working on out there, where that rippling up the spine, that working on the spine and building up, there's only so much active muscle control you have at this point in your practice over the muscles around the spine. So the intention becomes important. I want to visualize that used car tube man thing, right? Right? So I want to visualize that hollow up through the spine so that I can activate muscles that I don't have active control over. That's what the intention does for us on that level. Now there's lots of different ways to use intention.
Would you explain the sequence of breath, movement, and intention? And the reason I'm asking is, my thought at this time is that movement gives an experience in which I can evolve an intention. Intention also gives an experience which I can evolve movement and focus. It seems to be that it's interactive. It's not just, so sequentially, it seems like it can come in at different times.
Yeah, don't take it literally.
Okay,
These are just the 3 components.
not the sequence necessarily.
It's not 1, then 2, then 3. I know I said breath controls movement. The intention part is, to me, it's like encompassing how I engage the breath and movement.
Yeah.
The only thing so I guess I could draw it differently and say breath, movement, and then the intention is how I apply that.
That helps.
That's a better,
Well,
yeah,
you're
thank you for that. I mean, I know how it shows up in my head. Sometimes it doesn't always come out that way.
was in relationship to the nervous systems.
Yes, and this is why it depends is my favorite statement, because it's that, what are we talking about and what angle are we coming into it with? Just like with fear, and kind of tying this up a little bit. So I lost complete track of time, yeah. Tying this in with fear and just kind of putting a bow on this, fear is fear. Our being physiologically responds to fear the same way. It'll vary in intensity based on our experience and such, but the basic physiological response to fear is very consistent, human to human. How we perceive it will change where it is on the black and white or the gray scale, basically. how we perceive it. So what I tried to do today was kind of give you an invitation to say, okay, I need to identify what this, if I have a fear that's holding me back or holding me down, I need to identify kind of what is it about? Not deep down into, you know, the deepest root of it, but just on the surface, okay, it's a fear of the unknown. So what does that mean? And so in this case, we were talking about fear of the unknown potentially has to do with not having access to those boundaries. I don't know where I end and other begins, and so that makes me feel insecure and out of control and that kind of thing, right? If I don't create a place for understanding, I can't do anything different. And so the idea here is to create awareness that fear is fear, and then bring it into a consciousness that says, what am I really dealing with? What am I really dealing with?
Sometimes for me, when I have all of those, maybe, because in the
Thank you, Jeannie.
in present moment, I may be having all of those. And one of the things I've learned that I've had to do is I've got to identify the loudest fear and calm that fear first before I can even address the others.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's always the squeakiest wheel gets the
Yeah, the
oil.
squeaky wheel.
Jeannie, Jean, did you have something?
Yeah, earlier it occurred to me, I've been wondering what gets me out the door, because I know the biggest fear I have had my whole life is of being wrong or messing something up or destroying whatever relationships I have, just being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But what's getting me out the door is my fear of, the older I get, the stronger becomes this fear that I'm gonna die without ever having lived at all. And that is the thing that is getting me out the door.
Thank you. That was, that point I was trying to get to maybe 20 minutes ago. But it kind of got lost in the ethereal, which was great. I mean, I let that flow in here because I like it. But if I have a fear that's uncomfortable or painful, what gets me over here to a place that I can work with it, I have to have more fear of where I am than with the fear of where I'm going. And that's what you're describing. How we transition across here is to be less comfortable here than with the fear of change. And really what it comes down to is change.
I want to just applaud you. I really want to say this to you directly. For it to have that, and you show up every time on the floor, putting yourself in new learning is cool.
It is. I've been very impressed with her ability
The courage.
to show up for
Yeah.
herself. Yeah. Yes, we're talking about you to your face.
Yeah.
All right, questions? Okay, thank you for your time and attention,
you.
as always.
Thank you.